worse is what others did and didn't do. And I often refer to Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who I'm sure some of you know, of course, who did an amazing saint and martyr, who was part of the conspiracy to murder Hitler, and unfortunately the conspiracy was discovered, and he was executed really days before the liberation and the end of the war. He's an extraordinary human being, and Eric Metaxas, one of your own, wrote an amazing book about him. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's a tough read because of the theology. It's very theological, but it's an amazing book. But one of the things that's ascribed to Bonhoeffer is this saying, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act, and that God will not hold us harmless from not doing something. And the problem with this case, this Gosnell case, is the number of people who were silent and the number of people who didn't act. And it's quite a sobering thought, what actually happened. So just to kind of backtrack a little bit. In the courtroom, they projected images, as I said, in front of the jury. And one of the images that they kept projecting all the time was this picture here, so that they wouldn't get confused, because it was hard. There were so many people that were giving evidence. They tried to kind of, keep it like they could understand. So up here, if you think, there's Kermit Gosnell at the top, and beside him is his wife, Pearl Gosnell, and beside her is Ashley Baldwin. Ashley Baldwin, any of you who know this case possibly know some of this, but Ashley Baldwin is the woman who famously brought her own daughter to work. And I'm looking at a couple of young people here. The young person that she brought was 15, and the 15-year-old became the chief anaesthetist at Gosnell's clinic. And she was asked on the stand how much training she got to be an anesthesiologist, and she got 20 minutes. And her name is Tina Baldwin. She's not shown here. Tina Baldwin's shown here. Her daughter, Ashley Baldwin, is not shown here because she was a minor, but she did give evidence in the trial. And the funny thing is that more people would have died if Ashley Baldwin, the 15-year-old, hadn't been the anesthesiologist, because she took it very seriously. And she created a cheat sheet for herself with color-coded with the drugs. And she tried to she'd look at a person and try and make some kind of calculation to go a little bit of red, a little bit of blue, and she would make up the drugs herself. And because she took quite a lot of care to it, she never killed anyone herself. She actually took quite a lot of care. And for those of you who don't know, anesthesia is unbelievably precise. So people who have red hair are different than the rest of the population. People who are Asian are different than the rest of the population. Asians are treated differently, and it's just biology, right? So, and there was, of course, an Asian woman who went to this clinic. And of course, nobody knew that about red-haired people, about Asian people. They didn't even weigh her. And you know, if you've ever had anesthesia, you get weighed. There's a whole lot of weights and about height and about your age, and a huge number of things have to be factored in so that you wake up again. So you can imagine, they couldn't even weigh people here. One Asian person that ever turned up there did die because no one knew what they were doing. The two women at the bottom here, the bottom on the right-hand side, the two blondes, are called the Delaware women, Sherry West and Linda Williams. Detective Jim Wood, who was the detective on this case, they were called the Delaware Girls because they drove in from Delaware to the clinic every day. They're the two women who drove to Carnamine to death, the Bhutanese refugee who unfortunately ended up going there for abortion and was left with these two. And these two were described by Detective Jim Wood, who is the detective at the centre of this case. He said of those two women, you wouldn't let them mow your lawn, let alone give medicine to anyone. And that kind of brings me on to the point. So if you look at all these people here, all of them, they all had, and you can really see it in their faces actually, by the way. Like this woman here at the bottom, Liz Hampton over here, is a violent alcoholic, and she says that herself. These are the people who ran the clinic when he wasn't there. And he didn't come at night, the doctor didn't arrive until at least 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. This is who ran the place in the meantime. None of them had more than a 7th grade education.
Oh my God.
Plus they had, on top of that, most of them had some kind of alcohol or drug addicted issue, or serious mental health issues. That's who ran the clinic. That's who people ended up with. They went in there, and that's who ended up taking care of them. And I told this story a few times here, and I'm telling this probably very badly. I've been doing this 4 times in a row, so I'm kind of a bit tired. But when I think about Carnamaya Munger, so she was a Bhutanese refugee. Some of you know where Bhutan is. And it was that country that had all that strife, and basically an awful lot of poor people from Bhutan were booted out and ended up in Nepal in refugee camps. And Carnamaya Munger was one of those. And she was there in Nepal in a refugee camp for 20 years before she came to the good old USA. She lasted 4 months here before she was dead. And one of the details of the story, and that's why I would urge people to get the book. I have very few copies left, but I'll be selling them because I'm not taking them back because I've got enough of a heavy bag already. She had like, I mean, it's really pathetic. She literally, it was like if you ended up like tomorrow in China and you didn't speak Chinese and something terrible happened to you. Just think of that. Think of not being able to say anything. And so she literally could say hello. She'd say like hello and thank you. You know, that was literally it. And I mean, a good morning. Like she literally had 4 phrases. And it strikes me, and it struck me as I wrote the book, and it made me so sad that this woman had seen an awful lot of poverty and lived in quite awful conditions, but she ended up in this awful hellhole, in this like the center of something diabolical, like out of Dante's Inferno. Like she was in the last circle of hell. There was blood running down the walls. There was cats walking around the procedure room. And these women were administering anesthesia. And at one point, and this is all of this is from the trial testimony, all of this was said in a trial in the United States in this century, and no one reported on it. And at one stage, the phrase was that Mrs. Munger put up a fuss. She started to put up a fuss. And I remember writing it and thinking about it and putting it in there, and then it really struck me, you know. I thought, she was lying on bed, and she thought, oh my God, I'm going to die. She probably realized, you know, it probably struck her. Oh God, I'm going to die here. So she struggled and she tried to get away. And they phoned Gosnell and they told Gosnell, and he said, med her up. So they filled her up with Demerol, and she went into a coma, and she never woke again. She ended up in a hospital, but she never regained consciousness. And that's a Bhutanese refugee. A refugee, worth pondering that, by the way. A refugee in a sanctuary city, in the city of brotherly love. How do you like that? And she's dead and buried, and no one gave a damn. And I really mean no one gave a damn until a police officer, Detective Jim Woods, an undercover narcotics officer, who had no business being involved in this homicide, which was a homicide, but it had not been reported as a homicide, until he heard about it and started to pursue it. And he is just a complete rock star. And he, would replace your hope in humanity. I finished with all those people. Hang on, who else do I want to speak about there? The one in the middle, the girl in the middle is Adrienne Moten. And she's quite a case, really. So there's a chapter in the book called Willing Accomplices. Because all of these people got tips every day for the abortions. So if there was like 10 abortions, they were like rolling in it. Like everyone was getting $30 each. So they were out there like with $300 cash going home. It's like really cool, you know? So all that cash. And cash is a big thing. There's an awful lot of greed involved in this. When they raided Kermit Gosnell's house, they found $250,000 in cash in the house. Pearl had because I looked through all of the crime scene photographs, she had 3 fur coats. 3 fur coats. 3. And loads of stuff. Like the house, you'll see some photographs, I've got some photographs of their house. Their house is like an episode of Hoarders. You know Hoarders, I'm completely addicted to Hoarders. And the thing about Hoarders that's interesting is, Hoarders is a really sad program. Because Hoarders is about people with mental illness. Everyone is very sick, and it's very, very sad. And I always love when they do the story with the Hoarders in the episodes, because they say to the person, they ask the relative, was she always like this? Was she always like this? And there'll always be something happened. Her sister died, or something terrible happened to her. And that was when she started collecting stuff. So basically, it's a mental illness thing. And when you see the state of the place that this Hoarders episode. But Adrienne Moten is significant, incredibly significant here because of the death, the life and the death of baby boy A, who was a very central character in all of this, and a baby whose life I think is capable of changing the whole world. And I'm going to talk about him more in a minute, but that's Adrienne Moten. and then Madeline Joe, and basically that's that crowd. But here's the guy that had the worst effect on me. This is Steve Massoff, who is from a good family, who's from a nice situation in Pennsylvania, and he's one of those people who couldn't get into medical school in America, so he went to the West Indies. You know the way you do that? And he went to the West Indies, and then he came back, and you know the way you need to get a residency. So he couldn't get a residency in a hospital in this country. So he was working in a pub. And for anyone who doubts the presence of evil or the power of evil to do evil things and make evil things happen, the opposite of providential, whatever the actual opposite of providential is, diabolical, I suppose, some version of that. But he's working in this pub, and it turns out that his brother-in-law is a pharmaceutical rep who has a relationship with Gosnell, and says to this guy, to Steve Massoff, they're short-handed in that place. And Steve Massoff got a job there. Oh. And his testimony in the trial is so awful that I'm writing this book in the brilliant sunshine in Southern California. It couldn't be more beautiful, blue skies. And I remember being just terrified by reading what he said under oath, under pain of perjury, about what happened in there. And I remember I knelt down beside the computer and started praying because I was terrified. It was so frightening. He said, I was a fireman in hell. I ran with scissors. There were just so many of them. And at one point, it's so diabolical, at one point he said to the judge, by the way, none of this was worthwhile for the New York Times to report on. At one stage he said to the judge, feel that back of your neck. He asked the judge, and the judge said, can we take a note here that he's indicating with the back of his neck? And he said, that soft bit, you feel that soft bit? That's where we cut with the scissors. And he always they were having a good, the other thing that's awful here is they were all having a good time in the clinic. It's not like they were walking around soberly. They were all having a great time and joking about stuff. And he was having lots of jokes about things. He left the clinic, and there's a naughty joke, and I'm not going to tell it, that he was involved with, whatever. And that's what made him leave the clinic over this joke that soured and somebody got upset. But he didn't leave over killing babies. He left over some stupid joke. By the way, for anyone who's nervous, I'm not showing photographs of children here. No. Trust me, I don't do that. But this is where the babies were kept. They were in these bags. They ended up, a lot of them in these bags in the basement. And also in the fridge.
Oh my God.
So he put them into the fridge or the freezer, and he also put them, if you see that, what do you call that? Minute Maid, is it, yeah? He cut the top off the Minute Maid, and he would put them in there, or he cut the top off the milk carton, and he put them into the milk carton. Just put them anywhere, and we're all over the place. And this is what his office looked like, his own office looked like. You see where I'm talking about horrors, Like, can you imagine going to see a doctor in a condition like that? Imagine looking for advice about your health into a situation like that. That's another office in there. Okay, this is the most disturbing photograph I'm going to show. So that's some of the feet that he cut off. On the right-hand side, you can see the name, beginning of the name there. I'm not going to say the name because we're on Facebook Live, but the person involved there was contacted by the police to be, can you imagine that phone call? And they went, no, they didn't speak to her on the phone, they asked to make an arrangement, and they went there, they went to her house, and they explained to her that the feet of the child that she had aborted had been preserved, and they were in a jar in this place. And I do know that those feet have been buried in a Christian ceremony. And here again, this is another thing, like you imagine, this is part of the testimony. This is a little piece of the testimony, just to give you a flavour of the kind of thing that was said. This is a neonatologist being interviewed, being questioned. I gather, therefore, is it correct that at 22, 23, 24, all the way up to full term, a baby feels pain? Yes. Let me ask you this by way of hypothetical. Let's say a baby is 22, 23, 24, 25, and one were to take a pair of scissors and put it in the back of the neck to cut the spinal cord. Would that baby feel that pain? Yes. This is the tenor of the testimony that was heard during the trial. This is the way people talked during the trial. This isn't newsworthy, apparently, in this country, in progressive Pennsylvania. And this brings me to Baby Boy 8, which is kind of a big story, and it brings back in Adrian Moulton. So, Baby Boy 8 shares a birthday with my own father, and there was providential things all over the place with this story. You won't believe, like it's unbelievable, it's just got non-stop really. But so baby boy A's birthday is July the 12th, and he was born in 2008, and he died the same day. And so he had such an impact on the people that were there that two of the workers took photographs of him, Karima Cross and Adrian Moten, who I mentioned earlier. And he was a big boy, and so he basically fell out of his mother and was alive. And they put him into a Tupperware container, and he was so big that his legs hung over the side of the Tupperware container. And one of the things that I've got a massive education here on this through doing this, and people heard this on the stand about what it was like to be a preborn, like to be a little baby like that. What do you feel like? And they're cold. They're cold because they've come out of a warm spot, right? And so they really want to be warm. And so you'd always wrap them up. You'd always wrap them up nice and soft and something warm. And you'd also dim the lights because they don't like the light. They're very sensitive to the light. This is not the treatment that this child got, as you can imagine. And he was there, and he tried to curl up. And pretty much, of course, this, just keep on mentioning, keep on thinking in your head, this wasn't news, this is not news, this was not worthy of journalists to report. Karima Cross was asked to stand up on this, she was asked to stand up by the judge. Do you mind standing up and showing us what the baby did? And she stood up and she curled herself up in the fetal position to show them. And the jury gasped. And that's not news in America. That wasn't front page news every day, that's that story. So, Adrian Moten took a photograph of him, and you know, all of the people I showed you at the beginning, that spread of people, all of them went to jail. Everyone went to jail, including Adrian Moten, because every one of them killed babies when he wasn't there. That's what they were taught how to do. And Adrian, when the cops caught up with Adrian, she handed over the phone. And you know the way you have an old phone and you might throw it out or whatever? You know those old phones you have? She kept the phone because she knew someday somebody would come for it. And when the cops turned up, she handed them the phone and she said, there's a photograph in there that you need to look at. And they had to send it to Quantico to recover the photograph of baby boy A. But I said to her, it must be terrible to get arrested. Like, it must be terrible to get arrested. And she said, I wasn't arrested. I was rescued. And when she gave them the photograph, she said to them, take that, there's a really important photograph in there, and now I'm free. Oh. Finally I'm free. And then I talked to her about going to prison, and I said, it must be terrible to go to prison, like, you know, because I would just think, oh, I hate to go to prison. And of course, she went to prison with all the women, and they all went in at one time, and all the other women, because you know that whole thing of honour among thieves or whatever, they were scum, obviously, these women, according to the other women, do you know what I mean? It's like, well, you killed the baby, I stole stuff from Walmart, right? Do you know what I mean? So it's like, it was that kind of thing. So they started shouting, like, abuse at them, like huge amounts of abuse. And I said to her, that must be terrible, like, to have people shouting abuse at you. No, it didn't bother her at all. And I'm like, oh, did anything bother you about being in prison? And the thing that bothered her about being in prison was the dark. And at night, you know, you don't control the light, they turn the lights out. And she didn't want them to turn the lights out. Because she said, I would see him. Every night I would see him. And I immediately presumed she meant Gosnell. And she said, no, I would see him. I would see baby boy A. And all I could do was say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But none of that is news, apparently, in America. And just before you start to, like, literally, like, want to run out of the room crying and just give up completely, there's all kinds of good news in this story, truthfully, and I'm going to tell nice stories. I'm going to tell one nice story now to save you from despair. So, after the raid in the clinic, there was, they needed to have a grand jury, to convene a grand jury, because it was so confusing. There were so many things going on, and they wanted to make sure that you know, they wanted to make sure that they knew what was going on. What crimes have occurred here? What crimes have occurred? And in order to do that, you have a grand jury, and the grand jury sifts through evidence and hear from witnesses, and it goes on for a long time. In this case, it went on for almost 2 years. And the people in the grand jury are ordinary people with knitting and shopping. You know, they're regular folk who go, and they sit there day after day and hear this stuff. And they heard awful things. They heard the worst things that anyone would ever hear. You can imagine what they heard, and they got into all the details. And the grand jury can ask questions, and the witnesses are brought back and ask these detailed questions. Like, just the worst stuff ever. And then one witness appeared one day, a woman, and she she had gone to have an abortion at Gosnell clinic, and she was 7 months pregnant, and it's a 3-day process at that stage. So she went the first day and got the laminaria inserted, which is this thing for dilation, that is what they use. And she said to Gosnell was there, and she said to Gosnell, what happens to the babies afterwards? And he said, we burn them. And she went home, talked to her cousin, and her cousin phoned Gosnell and said, whatever, phoned up Gosnell and asked about a reversal, and you're not getting your money back. You're not getting your money back. This was his whole response. You're not getting your money back, and I don't do reversals. And so this woman is in the stand at the grand jury, and then she's asked by Christine Wexler, and what happened then? And she said, oh, my baby started kindergarten today. So she had gone to a hospital, and they were able to reverse the damage that had been done, and she had a baby, the baby was well and alive. And the grand jury stood up and applauded. And no one had ever seen that before. It's like the first time in the history of anyone's memory of grand jury. And when we heard that story, we said that has to be in a movie. Like, no matter what, we're going to have that in the movie, and it's in the movie. And then just, if you think that that's quite extraordinary, I'm just going to make it much, much worse, in a good way. So we went to Oklahoma City, we shot the film in Oklahoma City, and we didn't have an actress to play that role. And the director of the film, Nick Searcy, was in an IHOP for breakfast, and he saw a waitress, and he said to her, do you want to be in my movie? And there's a whole funny exchange between them, but anyway, long story short, that was the girl who ended up being in the movie, this girl from the IHOP. And movies are not shot in sequence, you shoot them whatever way is cheapest. So it turned out that the first scene that was shot was the last scene in the movie, right? So it's a kind of it's a nice scene, but it doesn't, nothing dramatic happens really. Anyway, but the second time this actress came back was the dramatic scene at the grand jury, and so she comes back, and I'm there. There was loads of people there. I mean, loads of extras, and she said to me, "Oh, come here, I have to tell you something. You won't believe this." And I'm like, because I spent a lot of time with her the first day on the set, so I knew her well. And she said, "This is my story. This is my story." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "I was having an abortion in Houston. And the nurse broke with protocol and said to her, here, listen," so she's lying on the bed, "here, listen to your baby's heartbeat," and put earplugs in her ears. And said, "Oh, I have to go now. I have to go out. I have to do something, but I'll come back. And left her alone, listening to her baby's heartbeat. And she said to me, "Oh, I just put my clothes on. I just put my clothes on. I just got out of there." And went out, and her grandfather was outside, and she said, "Let's go." And I really would love to play this interview for you, but I don't know. Were you all able to hear at the back of the room? So she told me that, and I went and told my clever husband that this had happened. I was crying when she told me. And he said, go back and ask her, can we film her and ask her the same question? Can she tell you the story again? And if we do nothing tonight, we should do this one thing, and you should see this, because it's so magnificent. And we're just going to see if we can get this cranked up. This thing can't be cranked up anymore, can it?
The volume.
The
volume.
Oh, come on, don't go bad on me. Okay. No, oh, don't do that to me. Hang on, no, it's all happening.
I'm playing Viola Brown in the Gosnell movie.
My voice will be in this, so just don't say yes or no. So you just spoke to me earlier. Why is this role important to you?
I actually symbolize with my character. I also was young and pregnant at once. I went in to actually abort my baby, and the nurse had let me hear my son's heartbeat. It's also something they're not supposed to do, but she let me hear the heartbeat of my baby, told me that was my baby's heartbeat, and said she'd be back to go ahead and do the procedure. So as I laid there for about maybe 4 or 5 minutes, she came in and said she'd be right in, and I laid there and I just started crying and decided it was something I couldn't do. I couldn't kill my babies. So I put my clothes on, I went out to my grandpa, told him I couldn't do it. He said, let's go. And I just feel I very much symbolize with my character in this, and my baby is now 6 years old.
But who are you playing in this film?
Viola Brown.
What happened to Viola Brown?
She also went through the same thing. She decided not to go through the abortion, and she had her baby, and her baby is 5 years old.
What would you say to girls that are in this situation?
If you have that opportunity and you decide not to go along with the abortion, don't do it. My son has been so much joy to me, and it's like, when I look at him, I just can't believe that I was going to kill somebody so precious that's a whole generation of me. And I'm so thankful to that nurse for giving me the opportunity to change my mind and have my baby. And it's been such a joy. There's days that I just lay in bed and watch him sleep. I'm so happy to have him. So if you have the opportunity, don't kill your baby. Have your baby. It's hard, but have your baby. It'll mean everything to you. Don't kill your baby. Have your baby. So.
Wasn't that worth it? Wasn't that worth leaving your house for tonight? Just to see that?
Yes.
Just to see her. Just for that. If nothing else. I just think it's the most amazing thing. And if you hear my voice, if you hear my voice, I'm not just... And the guy who came, the BTS, what they call the BTS, the behind the scenes who were shooting that, it was kind of, I ran with the BTS people and got her outside because she was in this scene and it was all very pressurized, and she started doing this and people saw it. And a couple of people came behind me and were watching, and I was like, or whatever. And then I turned around and there was like the first and second and third ADA, like all the assistant directors are all lined up behind me going. It was just great. So it's a great story. It's a great story, and stuff like that happened all the time on the set. A lot of people, turned up to the story. A lot of people have written to us as well because they're so touched by the story, And then, one of the things that I say is that dealing with abortion is it brings up images of the Holocaust, and particularly when you look at all the pictures and all that. And one thing that I found helpful was, and it's helpful to understand what's the significance of this movie, is that the numbers involved in abortion are so vast, it's very hard to get your head around. Sometimes it's overwhelming, 60 million babies, whatever, very, very hard to get your head around. And what they did in Schindler's List, in the movie Schindler's List, was everything was sepia tinted, everything was sort of black and white, monochromatic. And then there was this one moment of colour in the whole film, and I know some of you might remember that. There was a little girl, like a little toddler, wearing a red coat. It's the only colour in the whole film. And you see her at one stage, like with her mom walking in the street somewhere, and you can see her, whatever, and then you don't see her again until you see some of the, near the end of the film when Auschwitz has been liberated, and they show the mass graves. And in the middle of the mass graves, there's a red coat of the child. And I think our movie is a little bit like that, in the sense that baby boy becomes this person, a real person who symbolises everything that's crazy and wrong and evil in this world. And he becomes this struggling person who wanted to live, who desperately wanted to live, and was trying to curl himself up to protect himself, and was so vulnerable and so alone. And what we do in going to the movie, in reading the book, in knowing the story and telling the story, is you witness to the fact that he was ever here. And Adrienne Moulton was asked on the stand, why did you take a photograph of him? Like, why did you take a photograph of him? And she said, so that people would know that he was here for a little while, that he was big enough to be somebody's little brother, that he could have had a chance. Like, people talk like that at the trial, and no one thought that was worth reporting on. Should have been every day in the New York Times. Should have been every day on CNN. Should have been every day on NBC. Everyone in the country should know his name. Nobody knows Kermit Gosnell's name, but we're going to change that. And when I say about, silence in the face of evil is itself evil, not to act is to act, you have to think about, as I said, I don't have a problem getting my head around Gosnell in the sense that he's just a complete psychopath. But here's what I really have a problem with, is Governor Tom Ridge, a Catholic, who became a governor in Pennsylvania running on a pro-choice ticket, and he then basically sent out an edict saying hands off the abortion clinics. And I'm not making that up, that's in the grand jury's report. He's named in the grand jury report as somebody who had done that, who had given that edict. And because of that, they stopped inspections at abortion clinics. Kermit Gosnell's abortion clinic was not inspected in 17 years. 17 years. Nobody went in to inspect the clinic. During that 17-year period, 2 women died. Samika Shaw died in 2000. She was an African-American mother. And Carnamaya Monger died in 2009, a Bhutanese refugee in the city of brotherly love. But if Samika Shaw's death had been investigated, and if the Department of Health had decided to bother getting off their butts in Harrisburg and going to Philadelphia and going inside that clinic, Carnamaya Monger would be alive today. Because what they would have found if they had gone and inspected would have been cats walking around in a medical facility. And they would have found severed feet in jars, and they would have found, babies' remains in the basement. That's what they would have found, but they didn't bother looking. And they famously said in the grand jury report that Harrisburg's Department of Health inspect nail salons. They inspect nail salons on an annual basis. But 2 women died and no one went. If you don't think that that's horrific, it's like, I just think it's beyond belief. And then on top of that, the night of the raid, and I just always think this is extraordinary, this is why this film is so important, and the book is so important, and the story is so important, because nothing's really changed. So the night of the raid, 2 nurses from Harrisburg, from the Department of Health, went on the raid with the FBI, the DEA, and the DEA's office. A huge task force, about 17 people went in, including these 2 nurses. In the middle of which, and you've got all these cops all over the place, you've got all this weirdness, and the smell apparently was just horrific. And in the middle of all that, these women are lined up waiting to have their abortions, all on these lazy boys, and they're all, in whatever state they're at. And the 2 nurses, Jim Wood, the police officer, said, there's no way you're going to be letting this guy do anything until we check out what's really going on here. This place needs to be closed down. The 2 nurses phoned Harrisburg, phoned the superiors at Harrisburg, and were told to let him keep going. So he kept doing abortions while they were there. Can you credit it? I almost say that, and it almost feels to me like I'm making it up. Like, you couldn't believe that, could you?
No.
Because that thing of where they go into like a restaurant and they find some like moldy food or whatever, and they're like, close the whole place down, close the doors, everyone get out, that kind of thing, No, not in this place. That's how precious abortion is to them. That's how precious it is. You can't do anything to stop it. It's unbelievable. I mean, I made the joke, and funny enough, I'm going to be doing a speech in Harrisburg quite soon, and I'm really looking forward to it, because I talk about Harrisburg all the time, and in fact, if you read the book, you can literally feel my anger and my venom when I speak about them. And we also did an Audible book, by the way, something to mention to you, and I was saying it to some people before, you know what Audible is, right? You know Audible books, right? And it's, and so I did the reading of it, and we paid for it and all that, and got it produced in Hollywood, and honestly, the girl who was doing the production, when I came out to take my breaks, she was just in tears, and she had, she had to rethink her whole position on abortion after having to listen to me read this book. But these people are just despicable to me. Like, they're despicable. In Ireland, I remember my parents used to, the whole thing in Ireland, I don't know what it's like here, but the whole thing in Ireland about permanent pensionable jobs. I don't know, do you use that phrase, a permanent pensionable job? Do you know that phrase? Anyway, it's the holy grail in Ireland. Everyone wants a permanent pensionable job, right? Because it's great, because you're safe. Cradle to the grave, it's great, like you're totally sorted. And I had one of them myself, by the way, in another life. But a permanent pensionable job, there's something great about it. There's incredible security in it, you've got this pension no matter what, all that stuff. Would you ever do your job
No.
which are permanent pensionable jobs. So the permanent pensionable job people in Harrisburg, they're despicable, beyond despicable. Who are they? Like, what kind of people are they? What kind of nurses are they? And on the subject of nurses, I have to throw this in, which is unbelievable. Student nurses went on training gigs into that hellhole, and none of them reported them. And Christine Wexler, who's the ADA, who was a rock star. Did I show you a photograph of her yet? No, it hasn't come maybe yet. But Christine Wexler, who's just fabulous. Christine was interviewing these student nurses, you know, who had been there. And like she said, she just wanted to hit them. Just slap them, what is wrong with you? Like, what is wrong with you? And one of them had said, well, I thought it was like that. I just thought that's what things were like in an inner city clinic. How racist can you get? Okay, for those black people, that's fine for them. There's racism for you. That's what racism looks like. Protecting that hellhole. Or just unbelievable. What was it that politician I talked about? The something of low expectations. The what? The something of low expectations. What's that? What is fantastic phrase? The small bigotry. Who are the soft bigotry of low expectations. Thank you. Thank you. I turned 50 and I can remember nothing. And then, for anyone, this is the famous photograph that was taken. This is a photograph that was taken inside the courtroom. It was taken by J.D. Mullane, a local journalist in Philadelphia, of the empty courtroom. And you see the guy there? That's Detective Jim Wood, our rock star. So don't ever let anyone tell you that one person can't change the whole world. So J.D. Mullane changed the whole world. He took that photograph and it went viral. It went out, he tweeted it out, and everyone kept pushing it out and saying, why are these press benches empty? Well, this incredible carnage is going on. Another thing to remember is at the same time that this court case was happening, the Jodi Arias case was going on. And you remember Jodi Arias was that, she had the boyfriend who was a Mormon, and she stabbed him when he was in the shower, and there was all this detail about their life and all that. Do you remember that? And they went on and on and on and on, and we got to hear so much about Jodi Arias. We couldn't get enough of Jodi Arias, but at the very same time you had America's biggest serial killer on trial, and all these extraordinary things being told in the court, and no one heard it. Crickets. And then this is sort of slightly random, but I put it in here. So I have two cats, Mr. Scaredy Cat and Mr. Top Cat. Mr. Scaredy Cat is scaredy, but he's very nice. And Mr. Top Cat is just, like, really chilled. Anyway, I used to be a cat person, but I'm a cat person now. And I think cats are very nice, and I think dogs are very nice. And I won't hear bad words said about a cat or a dog. And most people like cats, and most people like dogs, and most people like puppies, and most people like kittens. Most people. In fact, nearly almost everybody. And in fact, a lot of us will have to admit that we spend quite a bit of time looking at those videos of kittens doing funny things. If a person can love a kitten, they can love a child. If a person can love how small and delicate and gorgeous a little kitten is and how sweet they are, they can love a baby in the womb. It's just a small push in one direction to get people to think like that. And I do think that the thing that's missing in this country is that culture of realizing what it is that's being destroyed here all the time. And Planned Parenthood are very clever at making people unclear about what's going on here. And you need to be making people very clear about what's going on here, that in this country, unlike almost any country in the world, you're in this very, very exclusive club of scumbag countries. Pakistan, yes. North Korea, America, who abort children up to 9 months. Right up to 9 months legally. That's a scumbag group you're in there, and it's really unbelievable, China, there's the company you're keeping. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And nobody knows it. Very, very few people know that. And people should know it. People need to know it, and people need to know what's going on. And it's the thing about the case, about the Gosnell case, it's kind of like a gift in a terrible way. Is that, okay, this guy killed babies, he murdered them, right? It's murder, it's legal murder, that's why he's in prison. But the difference between what he did legally and what he did illegally and what is legal is so marginal. It's so, but it's like it doesn't matter. And the great phrase that Kirsten Powers used was, it's morally irreconcilable that one is legal and one is illegal. Like it's geography. It's mere geography. And I just thought that was a great phrase. So Jim Wood, I just did a screening in Philadelphia with Jim Wood. Jim is from a family of 11. His auntie had 13 children. There's cousins all over the place. He's just an amazing person. But Christine Wexler said this about him, and the first chapter of the book is by Jim Wood. Jim Wood's remarkable. They couldn't have done this case without him. He was obsessed. He was Mrs. Monger's champion. He was the only one. She was dead and buried. And everyone in progressive Pennsylvania couldn't give down. In progressive city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, they couldn't give down. Like they could not give down. There wasn't even a police report until Jim Wood came along. And her case became a homicide. And he pursued it relentlessly. And he was an undercover narcotics officer, not a homicide officer. He's just the most amazing person ever. These are the two ADAs that did the investigation, Christine Wexler and Joanne Pescatore. And they're just great. And they're super smart girls. You can imagine how smart they are. Neither of them knew the law in Pennsylvania. And the law was 24 weeks at the time. 6 months, totally legal. That's Kirsten Power's article. And that's Steve Walk. I'm going to flash past that. That's J.D. Mullane, rockstar. This is us. The middle is my husband, he's still my beating heart. And then it's our business partner, Magdalena Segena, and she's Polish. And we had this mad notion so Phelan sat through the court for 3 days, came back to Los Angeles, and said, I got water going on here, I'm going to start consuming it. It's very important to stay hydrated. And he came back to Los Angeles and was obsessed with this story. And we said, we want nothing to do with abortion, Magda and I. As I said, we were neutral on abortion. And he basically said, I'm going to get the trial transcripts for 3 days of the trial, and you can buy trial transcripts. And for those of you who didn't know, the money goes to the stenographer. Which, by the way, I think is just a crime. The stenographer was already paid, and everything's digital, but you still pay them. And you don't pay them small amounts of money, you pay them shed loads of money. Nearly $10,000 that we spent. Yeah, good to know. So anyway, he bought the transcripts, and Phelan and or Magda and I read the trial transcripts, and that was all we needed to do, to decide that this was the only thing we wanted to do. And we had money for a different project, and we sent it back. And I remember it was coming up to Christmas, and we spent the whole Christmas talking about it. We were obsessed. And we were obsessed with the idea that no one knew, and this extraordinary case had happened. But it's one of the things that I think is extraordinary about this case, and it's very, very, very useful, is that in order for the jury to make up their mind about what was going on, they had to have a good abortion explained to them in forensic detail, so they could distinguish between a good legal abortion and murder. And so they had 2 abortion doctors take the stand and describe an abortion. And that's on the stand, under pain of perjury, under oath. And it's great. You just can't make that stuff up. They're not pro-life activists, I can tell you. And their description completely shocked the jury. And one of the most shocking things, and it's really interesting, we changed it for the film because we thought it would interrupt. It's funny. So Janine Turner, who some of you of a certain age would remember well, she was the girl out of Northern Exposure. She's really cute, and she's real fun, and just great. She's a grown woman now, but she plays the good abortion doctor. And one of the first questions that was asked during the trial of this good abortion, there were 2 abortion doctors, and one of them was asked, just by way of explaining how you're expert, that you're expert to do this, how many abortions did you do in your life? And the answer was 40,000. That's the noise. And that's the noise the jury made. The jury gasped. Now, we actually changed it in the film, and we made it 30,000, because we thought it would interrupt people watching the film. That it would, you know the way something can come at you, but it's so outrageous that it interrupts. You think, right, I don't believe anything now. We thought we need to change it, so we brought it down to 10,000. The truth is, it's 40,000. Under oath. You have to tell the truth under oath in a court of law. 40,000. Yeah.
Did they describe the abortions, the different types, like by trimester?
Yes. They mostly talked about second trimester in detail, and they also described comfort care. which is where a child is born in an abortion and the child is alive. And what do you do in that case? And it's amazing. And they described it and they said, let the baby die. Just let the baby die. Don't do any intervention, let the baby die. Eventually it will pass. So this is the poster of the film, fabulous poster. And we did a crowdfunding campaign and we asked the public for $2.1 million. You know, what drugs were we on that day? You know, God bless us, I tell you, like we got Oxycontin or something from Gosnell that day. But unbelievable, and we raised $2.3 million from almost 30,000 people all over the world, mostly from here. And the stories connected with that were amazing, and beautiful people got in touch, and really beautiful, like amazing things happened. One person in Ohio, a woman, sent $50,000. And that was not charitable. That's not to a 501c3. They never, you know, that's off the top. A woman in Colorado sent $10,000. And the woman in Colorado, and she know I'm very friendly with her. You keep friendly with people like that. But it's very funny, and she loves me telling the story because there was a problem with PayPal and the whole thing, I was like, give me the phone, and if I have to drive over there myself, I'm going to get this money, you know. And after we managed to clear the thing up and we got the money, she phoned me a few days later and said, you know, you need to be on the Rush Limbaugh show. And I'm like, oh yeah, I do. You know, like it's impossible to get on the Rush Limbaugh show. And then she said, no, but I know a guy who knows Mr. Schnursley. And long story short, I'm like best buds with Mr. Schnursley now. Mr. Schnursley and me. All during the election, by the way. Mr. Schnursley was sending me text messages. Just love that guy. I got on the show for 15 minutes. The money was rolled in. And so that's Dean Kane and Sarah Jane Morris and Alfonso. And then that's Michelle Malkin, who's a rock star. And anyone who knows Michelle Malkin, she was amazing in this. She donated a ton of her own money, tons of her own money. And she's also freely doing the radio ads for us. Complete rock star. Sarah Palin tweeted out about the campaign at the time, which was really helpful. And as I said, Rush Limbaugh, rock star. What else have I got here? I'll just do this, and I'm going to stop then and take maybe 2 questions. I don't know what the time is. But this is our recreation of the clinic that we did for the film. And the morning that we did that, I went down on the set and I was on my own, and I walked into that room and I burst out crying. Because I just thought, it was so well done. Like this is what, you know, these people who do set design, this is what they do. They recreated it based on photographs. And I just thought it was so sad. What a sad place, you know. This is basically where Carna Monger died, you know. And I put it on Facebook, and a woman wrote this. I was there, a room much like that one, for a purpose now I'm not proud of and regret. But God is good. I'm grateful that I saw my responsibility and decades later repented, not realizing that the silenced voice of God was because of my unrepentant deafened ears. I'm grateful for this project. I will pray. 10 years ago, I reconciled with God about my sin. I also reconciled with a child I murdered and threw away. I let her go again with dignity and a name, Julian. Today, God has honoured my repentant heart in many great ways, and here, my first granddaughter, in which my kids named her after an aunt she never knew, Julian. And that's the photograph of the girl there. And we got lovely messages from people like this one. Thank you both so much for doing this. I'm 52, and when I was 26, I had an abortion. I've not been able to have kids since then, and it's a decision I regret deeply. I'll meet this child in heaven. I'm so horrified over hearing about the clinic, and I'm so glad you're going to expose it. Thank God, and God bless you both. And we got lots of lovely messages like that, and we've met all kinds of amazing people, as you can imagine. You know, I could go on and on like that. But things that are really important that I say to you now are October the 12th. The movie comes out all over the country on 750 screens. And if you have the wherewithal, or you know somebody who has the wherewithal, you should buy out the theatre near you. Just buy the whole lot out. Or buy 20 tickets. And you need to go and tell your local priest that the church are in a bit of trouble right now. And they need to show leadership in something where people really care. And they need to tell people that they need to go and see this film. Because it changes people. I've watched people change. I gave a talk in Erie, Pennsylvania, and a woman brought her pro-choice daughter with her, who changed her mind after hearing the story. People are very close to changing their minds all the time. They just don't know. And people are good. They just don't know. And I think that that's what happened in Ireland. People didn't know what they voted for. They really didn't know what they voted for. God help them. And it's going to be, they're going to live to really regret that. But it's a very, very frightening what happened there. I'm going to stop now. I'm going to, of course, the minute I sit down, I'm going to think of all the things I didn't say. As you can imagine, I could say an awful lot more. But I would like to take questions. I have a few books. You can see them there, like very few. But I don't want to take them back to Los Angeles tomorrow. Okay, thank you.
Isn't she wonderful, ladies and gentlemen? And now, it's good to see you. Let's all stand up. Seriously, stand up and applaud loudly. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. But now, we have a few announcements and we're going to take up a free will offering. Now, those of you who are on Facebook Live, bear with us. If you'd like to donate, you can do that. You see the information on how to donate. And anything you give to donate to Defend Life is 100% tax deductible. So if you'd like to give $50,000, you can give that, write that off on next year's tax return. Seriously, be generous. We're all volunteer. We're unlike the vast majority of pro-life groups. Nobody gets paid. So we're all volunteers. So everything you give goes back into the movement to fight abortion. Not only to fight abortion, not only talk about ending abortion, but to end abortion. Because as Father Frank Pavone has said so eloquently, unless we end abortion, abortion will be the end of America. It's that simple, ladies and gentlemen.
And Jack, your quote as well too. The quote.
Good. So anyway, has everybody filled out one of the cards for this beautiful drawing we're going to have for this? Everybody filled out one of the cards? Last call for cards. Got a few cards over here. Just bring them over if you would. We'll have that drawing in a moment.
I'll get everything.
And remember, start wearing these pro-life t-shirts. They're wonderful. And if you forgot, just get a hold of your card afterwards and put a note that you want one. We'll send you one. You have to put down your size. We have small, which is a child size, medium, large, extra large, double extra large. Okay, well, let's have that drawing right now. I'd like to ask my friend Myrna to pick the winner. You try to sneak away, you can't leave that. And read the name of the winner.
Anita Knight.
Come on up, Anita. Yeah, just put it down the basket. Congratulations, Anita. I love it. So thank you for your generosity. And we'll be seeing you at our next Defend Life lecture tour in October featuring Bud McFarland Sr. And then the one in November featuring State Senator Patricia Rucker from West Virginia. Two fantastic ones. All of those will be on our website at defendlife.org. Okay.
Thanks, Jack.
We're back for questions. And where's our rock star? Hey, rock star Ann McElhinney, get up here to answer questions. You can sell your books later. So if anybody has a question, I probably can answer it for her. Yes, Jody.
Did she get any pushback? Did she get a lot of pushback about this movement from the other side, from the left?
I'd say she's gotten very little pushback, but the pushback will be what happens when we try to get this movie into local theaters, and that's the key. When we go to our pastors and our pastors say, well, no, we really don't do that. When we go to our friends, well, no, I don't think I could go see that movie. So here, what do? It's simple. You watch the movie trailer yourself. Go to Gosnell movie. Watch it again, watch it again. Every time I watch it, I tear up.
Sure.
That's horrible. Then send that out as an email to your friends.
Yeah, it's
Tell
on
them to
Facebook
watch
Live.
it and
Yeah.
then respond. What do you think of it? And then, remember, what's the date that it's coming on the
Ann
theaters?
McElhinney.
That's 4 weeks today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's on there. I mean, if you were able to like to be on your phone or so you can watch it yourself. It's like that's all live right now.
And sell them out on that weekend.
Johnny Collar, David.
October 12th, 13th, and 14th. That's the key. If you go groups on that website, gosnellmovie.com, there's a link. It's groups at gosnellmovie.com. That person will tell you, oh, hey, you want to have a theater here in Frederick? Then you'll have a theater here in Frederick. But that's the idea. Find out where it's going to show, and then buy out that theater. And the cost of buying out a theater might be as little as $800, which is not a lot of money. And then you can even make it into a fundraiser, like a fundraiser for Days for Life. So lots of possibilities here. But we need to take this wonderful gift, the good Lord has given us. This is what could make abortion illegal. And not only illegal, make it unthinkable. And would that be great? Yes. Yeah.
Even more despicable, and I'm not defending that, that's despicable. What's even more despicable is our church not taking a stand against those politicians who claim they're Catholic and are pro-choice. And I think we ought to start applying pressure to the upper hierarchy, not the people, but the priests and the archbishops and the cardinals. It's a scandal what's happening. To see someone like Pelosi and Biden say, I'm Catholic but I'm pro-choice, makes me sick to my stomach. We have 60 million people that were killed. A lot more worse than the few that were abused. I'm not defending it. That's despicable. It's even more despicable.
You're absolutely right, Jim. It's despicable that our bishops have done so little. Why? I can remember the late Cardinal Keeler, and I was bugging the head of the Maryland Catholic Conference. I said, his name was Dick Donnelly. Hey, what are you going to do, Dick, to get then Archbishop Keeler on track? Well, I've spoken to him privately, going to write me. That wasn't enough. He spoke privately, apparently, with Barbara Mikulski, who's in the same league with those two other characters we just mentioned. Thanks be to God that she's no longer the U.S. Senator, but the person who's there is just as bad. But it's not to speak privately. You do that first, but if nothing good happens, then you go public. We need bishops to go public and start talking about the fact that this is taking people to hell. It's that simple. Dollar.
And then Sarbanes was just reelected. He said, thank God Sarbanes was reelected. I said, you got to be kidding me. He's pro-choice. He said, yeah, but privately he's not. I said, Dick, if I heard that one more time, I'm going to throw up.
Right. The Maryland Catholic Conference is part of our problem. Their big mission is to get money for textbooks for Catholic schools. Our Catholic schools, with a few exceptions like the wonderful school you started, are by and large non-Catholic. They're Catholic in name only. They're like as Catholic as Barbara Mikulski. So we have to do that. We have a great opportunity at this bishops' meeting in November at the Myriad Waterfront. So anybody who wants to be involved in that, we're trying to have a hospitality script for the good bishops. There are some wonderful bishops like Bishop Morlino, some other really great bishops. Here's what Bishop Stephen Lowe said recently. Steve, everybody knows what the ordinary of the Church of the Chair of St. Peter is? And we'll have Ann back here in a second. I'll just finish with that thought. That was, and I think it'll be Benedict XVI's legacy, that he sent out this wonderful ordinariate to enable priests, Anglican priests, to become Catholic priests. So there's at least 4 parishes here in Maryland that are ordinary parishes. There's probably 40 around the country. So Bishop Stephen Lowe, and by the way, when he was interviewed recently, he was at the North American College, and this is probably back in the 70s, and McCarrick was probably the bishop of Metuchen, New Jersey, it might have been the 80s, would come to visit his seminaries, and he said, we all knew what was going on. So, wow, but here's what he said. He's spoken out very eloquently, and some other bishops have spoken out eloquently. They are heroes, and we want to honor them at this bishop's meeting. So pray that that actually happens. I think the security at that meeting will be out of sight, but we're going to try to get reservations in the hotel, but be there. And I think it'll be a great opportunity to speak to the good bishops and let them know that we support them. I think a lot of the bad bishops aren't going to be there. Guess what? McCarrick's not going to be there. Worrell's not going to be there. Bransfield's not going to be there. And I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. I think there's a lot more. But the church is going to be purified, and that's the good news. Let's go back to our wonderful speaker.
He's going to let me speak. Oh, sure. Yeah, my name is Barry Sullivan. I actually spoke here about 3 years ago. And I've asked Ann for just a second, about a year ago, through the grace of God and several different things, I met Ann at a conference that I normally didn't attend and got to see the movie. And I've been involved in the pro-life movement since I was 13, which is almost 47 years. And I was in tears after I watched this movie. And the way, after listening to Ann, I was trying to figure out the best way for me to encourage you to go. And think about that nurse that let the mother listen to that heartbeat. That's what this movie is. I was so enthused about it. I got Ann to set up a showing for my 84-year-old mother who's in Naples, Florida, been involved in the pro-life movement for 60 years and still is involved. And she's having a private showing next weekend to get people to buy out theaters and all this. I will guarantee anybody that you have come see this movie, especially young people, will thank you. And this is the kind of thing which will force the laity to demand the bishops do something. Because you can't watch this movie and not be moved. And again, it ends very in a positive, uplifting way, but we really have to change America, and this is the movie that can really do it. I can't stress that enough. Okay, again, my mother's 84, has been involved, and she was one of the delegates that elected Reagan at the Electoral College, so that's how involved she's been. And she said the same thing. We saw the uncut version, but this movie and the whole thing, she didn't stress this, but the whole thing started on a drug raid. They were dealing opioids out of the clinic. So you can tell people, if you think opioids is a problem, here's where it started. That's how, this is not just a film about abortion. It's got so many different things in it. You can't come away thinking, wow, that's wrong, this is right, I've got to do something. Okay, that's the evil that's connected. Okay, thank you for the time.
If anyone has any questions, you need to go to gosnellmovie.com for pretty much all the questions you need answered. If you want to write to me, if you want to be in touch, if you have anything that you didn't get to say, you can write to me on the Gosnell Movie Facebook page. Right? No, and I read everything. Yes?
Were you privy to the videos that were taken out by that young man in California, the person who was laid out?
He's like a dear friend of mine, and I think he should get the highest possible honor this country can give. David Delight.
What was the question?
The question is, do I know David Delight, and do I?
Were you privy to the videos? Were you able to use that video during the casino?
Yeah, I've seen everything.
Yeah, were you able to incorporate it into the movie?
No. This is a movie. This is not a documentary. No, that's documentary stuff. Any other? Yes.
I have two questions. One is, do you think that Gosnell was mentally ill and that's why he committed these serial murders? Or do you think it was just plain evil? And my second question is...
There was a lot of money in it.
The second question is, the Governor Tom Ridge, who was a Catholic, and who did and said what he did, was there any consequences for him and all the health departments and all those people?
No. Some of the people in the health departments, took early retirement, but people, there wasn't a big reckoning. There wasn't a big reckoning there. And in terms of what Gosnell, I think he's got some kind of narcissistic tendencies. I think he's really greedy. I think people like the money. It's a lot of money. People like the money. And greed has.
At the age of lawsuits, how did the two women that died, how were they not found? I mean, how, you would think a family member or something would sue.
I think there was a suit of some kind in the case of Sneaky Shaw. I think there was some kind of settlement. And I think Carter Mower's family have been given a settlement now of like millions and millions of dollars, but they'll be waiting a long time before they see any money. Because it's against his estate, which is a big estate. But and I know there's very good people who are trying to help the Mongers get some justice, but No.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, the question was, was there any, is Governor Ridge in any way criminally, any kind of criminal charges pending against him? The answer is no.
Shouldn't there be?
No, there should be. Of course there should be. Of course there should be. It's extraordinary.
I just said, where's the Pennsylvania AG on his back?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
What's the name of the ABC? You mentioned an ABC.
Terry Moore.
Is that person still involved with ABC, or did they?
I don't know that, but Terry Moore was working for ABC as a correspondent. He was the one who said probably America's biggest serial killer.
Question,
yep.
Please. How have the major chains, Regal, AMC, Cinemark, how have they been in dealing with this?
That's a good question.
Release?
We're working with all of them, and so far we have booked 100 AMC theatres, but we need 600 more theatres. So we're working with all of them, and we're hoping for the best. But please keep an eye on that for us, because none of this, no part of this has been easy, and I don't expect even this part to be easy either, by the way. And if we get on 600 screens, we will be on Netflix. And getting on Netflix is 50 million homes. It's a big deal.
What about women who had complications? There must have been many women infections.
Yes.
Is that ever brought out? How many complications?
It's all in the book. And there were lots of people, and and there were people, and there were suits that were settled against the state of Pennsylvania, but they still didn't mean the Department of Health would go and inspect the place in 17 years. There's a terrible case in the book. Oh my God, this is terrible stuff in the book. Women would come out of there, like literally with bits hanging out of them. One girl who was there, one night, and this is a terrible story, and her cousins were across the road having pizza, waiting for her to come out, and eventually when they caught up with him and got into the clinic, it's a terrible, terrible story. He handed them like a container, and they brought that container to the hospital to show what bits they had gotten, so that the hospital would know about the bits that weren't taken, and he still wasn't inspected. And that happened in one of the big hospitals in Pennsylvania. It's beyond belief. This happens, with frequency.
And for the benefit of those people who are watching on Facebook Live, how can they order your book?
You can, the book, Gosnellbook.com. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, it's everywhere. And actually, the softback is about to come out on, I think it's already out this week or next week, the new softback.
And how do they get your audiobook?
And the audiobook, you get to go to Audible, download the app, the Audible app. In fact, if you download the Audible app and give your Visa card, and then get the book, and then you cancel a month later, you actually don't even pay for it. But obviously you would want to do that. But I love Audible, by the way, and it's kind of a good way to do it, because you can listen to it if you have a long car journey. It's rough listening to it. Yep. Yes.
There was another pro-life movie put out in the movie theaters a few years ago. It was called Gimme Shelter. A friend of mine did the documentary. No, it was a dramatization. But anyway, what it's so important to really get the people out there, because what happened, they showed it for 2 weeks in the Regal Cinemas, and then it disappeared. And I called.
It disappears if people don't go. That's the only reason
right.
it disappears.
And I went to the CEO of the Regal Cinema and wrote him a letter, and I said, "Why did you pull this? Why did you pull it only after 2 weeks?" And they said, "Well, nobody showed up, and so it doesn't make money. We pull them."
Yeah. By the way, it's fair enough. By the way, sorry. I mean, it's a very difficult business to run, cinemas. I have no problem with that. If people don't go, they're going to pull it.
Well,
they're trying to make money there. You know, it's a huge, massive property. They're paying taxes, so they have to make a living.
Well, since you were so successful on your GoFundMe project with making the movie, how about doing a GoFundMe for Regal Cinema to pay out? You know, get this movie in the shows. People need to see this. It's so important.
I'm not sure what
here's the answer to the
pay
question.
For
and this is the last question. The ball is in our court, okay? She has done and continues to do as much as she possibly can, along with her wonderful husband and their business partner. And so many other people have already anteed up $2.3 million. The ball is now in our court, okay?
So let's do a GoFundMe project.
No, listen to me, okay?
Buy a ticket.
Listen to me.
That's all you do.
What we need to do, 3 things. 1, go watch the trailer again, okay? And watch it several times. Number 2, send it to all your friends, okay? Ask them to watch it and get back with your comments.
I'm going to do all that.
Let me finish, okay? And number 3, after you watch it, after you send it to your friends and get their comments, what we need to do at that point is go out and buy out theaters for the opening performances on Friday, October the 12th, which is 4 weeks tonight, okay? Forget about GoFundMe. It doesn't cost $2.3 million. You can buy out a theater for as little as $800 or a big theater for a max of $3,000. Go to people like your pastors, Knights of Columbus councils, people who are financially blessed, doctors, lawyers, get them to buy out. Jody, it'd be a great idea to raise some money for your 40 Days for Life. Buy out one of those appearances. Go to that website again, gosnellmovie.com, and you can find out information about groups at Gosnell, gosnellmovie.com. If there's somebody who'll be in touch with you and you want to do an appearance, a movie theater here in the Frederick area, the Baltimore area, Keokuk, wherever, those of you who are watching on Facebook Live, that's what we need to do. To make this movie really fly, is we need to buy out theaters for that weekend of October 12th, October 13th, and October 14th. Thank all of you for coming tonight, and let's hear it again for our wonderful speaker.